Hey guys, it's Sunday night. It means it's another episode of the M Cluster. I'm Slider, your host, and tonight we are with Brandon,
Hi guys.
and we are with Amina Marks.
Hello.
And tonight we're doing The Dark Crystal, which is a great movie and one of my favorites, but it wasn't my pick, it was her choice, so we're going to go ahead and let Amina do the lead in.
All right. I picked this movie because this is one of the movies that kind of shaped my preferences for movies and books starting off, as a small kid. There's a 1982 movie that was basically made by Jim Henson and Frank Oz, and it's the height of puppeteering, really. And it's not a movie that you're going to see made again ever. Nothing like this is ever going to be made again. It was just this time frame that you had like Labyrinth and Dark Crystal, animatronic kind of things. And it's one of those movies that once you see it and you see the epic story that goes along with it and the great acting they did with these puppets, that you can see what real storytelling is. And, I watched this when I was a little bitty kid, and I'm sure that that made it even better because you have that little sense of wonder that you have as a kid. But just watching these two characters, Jen and Kira, they have this epic quest to heal this crystal that has cracked, and because of the crack, their world is kind of inhabited by these two separate kinds of people. The Skeksis, which are the embodiment of the materialistic, terrible, violent nature, and the mystics, which are this kind of like gentle race, kind of like Buddhist almost. And if they don't heal the crystal, then the Skeksis will be immortal forever, and there'll be no stopping them, basically. So either Jen and Kira can fix it, or the world is doomed. And like I said, it shaped how I view fantasy, the books that I read now, the kind of stories that I like, and it's a shame that I think a lot of our younger generations will probably never watch this movie because it's so old now. But I think they're really missing out. So, what did you guys think?
Well, I think what on your comment there about the younger generation not seeing it, that's kind of our responsibility, is to make sure that we do show it to them. Like, I know I've showed it to my nephews. I don't have any kids, but yeah, if you're out there and you have kids, you want them to see this movie.
Yes.
It's almost a prerequisite. But Brandon, what do you think?
It was definitely one of my favorite childhood movies, along with The Labyrinth and The Neverending Story. And I mean, it's right. They don't make movies like this anymore. They just kind of stopped once they started really introducing CGI, and I don't think you get the same kind of depth, so to say, with the animatronics that they did, with the way they did the acting through the animatronics.
Yeah, the puppets get personality based on the people that are acting with them. And the problem, I think, with CGI is that you never get realistic movement. You never get any sense of, your brain's always going to know that that's not real. Whereas you have puppeteering and animatronics, and, they're moving in ways, physical ways that work for your brain. And so you get drawn in a little bit better than CGI do.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. And this, when you say this is not going to be something that we're ever going to see again, I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, it's a very limited group of people that actually did this kind of work. Frank Oz and Jim Henson were pioneers in it, and by far best of the best when it comes to this kind of work. But it's also just cheaper now to do a lot of the CGI stuff, and a lot of these studios don't take into account the actual artistry of it. And that's something that I wrote about earlier this week, is the artistry in this movie is amazing on all levels. And I'm not just talking about, sitting back and watching it as a film. I'm talking about the making of it, the crafting, the scenery. They didn't have computer-generated images back then. So, half of what we're seeing is hand-painted glass matte backgrounds that are mixed in with crafted stage, soundstage that make this world come to life. And I think that is amazing. You never see anything like that now. I think the closest thing you might come to that now is maybe some of the street performers that do the chalk drawings on the street to give the floor depth kind of thing. But this is, it's incredible. And also movies nowadays, take 3 to 9 months maybe to film. This movie took 5 years. in filming. You know, to get things right, to get everything set up, to do everything the way they wanted to. Jim Henson actually bought the rights to the film back from the studio because they thought it was going to be a flop, and they didn't want to promote it the way he wanted to promote it. So I mean, this is another truly independent product, something that he made his way, and there's so much of him that comes through in this film. If you know anything about Jim Henson, he was very spiritual, very new agey kind of guy, and there's a lot of subtext in this movie that talks about that kind of stuff. The duality between the Skeksis and the Mystics, which were originally called the Uru. You know, what it means to fracture someone. You know, the concept of the epic quest. You know, being alone in the world. I mean, there's so many different underlying themes in this movie that come through because of the way he made it, because it was straight out of his imagination, that make this just a completely wonderful film.
And the kind of acting that he put into some of the main villains, like you know, the Chamberlain, Skeksis, and things like that, it's like you were instantly like revolted by these people, and they're just puppets. But the way that they have them act, the way they have them move, you're completely revolted by that dark side of humanity that these things are supposed to accomplish. And you know, when you get to the Mystics, when they're slow moving, they're completely non-violent. It's like that's a part of people also. And at the end of the movie, when they're joined together, you know, I didn't appreciate that much when I was a kid, but you can see it now, and it's like, well, you have to have both sides to coexist, or else, you know, you're not a whole being. And that being said, those things that the Skeksis and the Mystics joined into scared the crap out of me when I was a kid.
Well, it's funny because I was reading up on that. They're actually called the Uru Skeksis, which is you know, kind of straightforward. But one of the things I found very interesting, and I didn't know about this until I did some research for the show this week, is that they're actually coming out with a graphic novel, or they've come out with a graphic novel of The Dark Crystal. Now, 30 years later, after this movie's come out. I mean, that's how well this movie has endured, and how much people, especially people in my age bracket, love this film. You know, just the fantasy aspect of it is incredible, and I don't think anyone. I can see people saying they're bored with this movie because they're used to flashy special effects and explosions and all sorts of stuff. But I can't see anyone saying that this movie is not well done or well made, or you know, I can't see any real complaints with the film. Even though I do have a few things that I want to bring up. So, what's your favorite part of it, Brandon? What do you think? Like, what brought you into this film the most?
Just the genre in general. I would have to say. I mean, I've always been a fan of fantasy movies, and partially because of this movie and The Labyrinth. The way they tell the story, I have a vivid imagination, so seeing creatures that, you know, are not from our world brought to life, just the design aspect from Jim Henson Studios was just great. That is pretty much what sucked me in so much.
Yeah, and those puppets, there's two levels of puppeteering that was going on. One, you'll see where Jen is moving, they show him pretty much from like the legs up, not, you know, you don't see his feet, and that's because Jim Henson's actually wearing this puppet on his head and controlling the arms, so that when he walks, there's an actual natural motion to the way the puppet moves. And then there's the Skeksis and the Uru. These the people that are inside of them were like dancers and mimes and people from that area of art, where they were really concentrating on the concept of their movement, and they had to work basically inside these costumes, looking at a monitor so that they could see what's going on around them. And while they're doing that, you've got the other people that are actually controlling the animatronics, which are the expressions, the eyes blinking. At one point, they have a dinner scene, which is disgusting. I mean, they're just sitting there like ripping stuff and drooling, and oh man, it's awful. But the fact that I was disgusted by it tells you just how well it's done, how good they did with this movie. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it this week, much less overall. And I've never once looked at it and went, "Oh, that looks such bullshit," you know.
Well, and that's the thing, especially with the way they did, or at least Jim Henson Studios does animatronics. They're superb. Even something as recent as Farscape was Jim Henson Studios. A lot of things in there were animatronics, not CGI.
Yeah, and I believe I don't know. This wasn't Jim Henson, but a lot of people were influenced by him. But in Jurassic Park, a lot of the close-ups of the original film of the dinosaurs are done animatronically, not computer image, because it gave it that sense of realism. You know, there's something about a real snarl versus a computer animated snarl that you know, just kind of makes you identify with what's going on the screen. But there are certain things, like I think it's interesting that we're following the main character, which is a Gelfling. His name's Jen, and it's sort of his epic journey, his mission that we're on. Except I don't really look at him as a hero in this piece. He doesn't do a whole lot. He's simply the conduit through which a lot of things happen. I think the biggest thing he did was figured out when he was presented with multiple shards, was to figure out by using the tones and thinking about what he did with the Mystics on how to figure out which one was the correct shard.
Yeah, really, Kira did far more here.
Yeah, Kira was pretty much the one that figured out how to get into the castle. She saved his life 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
In the film.
This gig.
Yeah. You know, Aughra. I love Aughra.
Aughra, yes.
She's so ugly. She's beautiful. And that was actually that's a direct quote from Frank Oz, who did the puppeteering.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he poured a lot of himself. Yeah, he did. He poured a lot of himself into Aughra, though. He's like, I really want this, you know, the femininity of this woman to come across. And there's actually somebody that commented on one of our posts this week saying that when they were younger, they thought Aughra looked like Oprah Winfrey. And I thought that was kind of funny. But all of the figuring out is really like kind of like this big group effort. The Mystics didn't do much at all, other than, you know, the one died.
and they showed up at the end.
And then they showed up.
Yeah.
You know, Kira did, I think, most of the heavy lifting. And I think, as far as screen time goes, and a lot of the story moving forward goes, the star of this movie was really the Chamberlain. You know, a lot of what happens because of the Chamberlain.
Yep, he had the most personality and the most things to do in this movie.
Yeah, and then there are a few other things where they talk about, at the very beginning of the film, they talk about how the Skeksis have figured out how to use the crystal to cheat death.
Yes,
and then the Emperor.
Most like disturbing parts of this movie when I was a little kid.
Yeah, it's like the Emperor immediately dies after that. So what were they doing wrong?
Well, you can only suck the essence out of so many podlings, you know. Eventually, it just doesn't work as well anymore.
Well, and they did say that it worked better with the Gelflings.
Yeah, and they ran out of Gelflings.
Right. Well, and that's their own fault, because they ordered the extermination of the Gelflings. One other thing, I wouldn't say it was well done, but I know I was a little disappointed in it looking at this film as an adult, is when we find out that Kira has wings. I feel like that was supposed to be a big reveal, and it just kind of flopped.
Oh, I think it was just meant to be a cute thing.
Well, just like she saves him by jumping off the cliff, and, you know, all of a sudden, poof, she has wings, and they float down to safety. And he's like, "You have wings?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I don't have wings." He's like, "Of course not. You're a boy." That's kind of where they drop it.
Well, it was just one of those like wondrous moments. It's like when I was a kid, I wanted to be Kira. I wanted to be that cute little like elf Gelfling thing with wings.
And some of when you say cute, I think that's another thing that I found interesting was when they started crafting these puppets, the puppeteers had to make multiple versions because they couldn't find one that actually looked cute. You know, I think she said she went through like 20 or 30 iterations of the Gelflings before they actually came up with something.
Some of them are pretty bad.
Yeah. So it was it was something they really had to work on to make it something that, like, kind of like you said, as a little girl, you wanted to be. It's like nobody I know as a kid was like, I want to be a Skeksis,
That one's just wrong.
Yeah, that one's, that
one looks like Jocelyn Guildenstern.
That's funny. And some of the stuff I read too was about working with Frank Oz and Jim Henson was just really, really moving in such a way, because they didn't just embed themselves in this work. They actually they emanated this kind of energy as far as the stories go that really sucked other people into the story, that really got them into feeling what was going on in this film. And it was a labor of love. Like, they talk about this thing like, not like a film, not like a project, but like something that they loved, something that they actually created and is living.
Yeah, and for some random trivia here, you were saying how they employed dancers a lot for the puppets to make more realistic movements. The next project they did was the Labyrinth after this, which had a lot of puppeteering in also. And they actually got Cheryl McFadden, who was a dancer, to do all the choreography for those puppets, and she's actually Gates McFadden from Star Wars: The Next Generation.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting.
So they employ a lot of dancers.
And one of the reasons they did that was because to get inside those costumes, they had to contort their bodies and stay contorted in such a way that would be really uncomfortable for anyone who doesn't have this kind of training. If you look at the Mystics, their head is elongated and kind of juts out from the rest of their body, and nobody's body's going to fit like that and have them be able to walk. So they're actually got their hand out kind of like that, and this is how they're operating the head, and their actual head is down like this, and they're looking at a monitor. So someone without that kind of training, I don't think could have pulled this stuff off as well as they did. Although, again, talking about the Mystics, they did a lot of slow walking.
Yeah.
It wasn't like there was a big battle scene.
Yeah, I guess the wheel had not been invented back then.
One of the things that I thought was interesting too was about the Garum. These big pod-like creatures.
Oh, the Gartham, yeah.
Gartham, yes.
The big beetle guys.
Yes. They had a lot of problems with people falling over.
Also scared the crap out of me as a kid.
Because their backs were so rounded and everything about that costume was very fixed that when they fell over onto their backs, it was like a turtle. They could not get up without someone helping them. I was hoping that there'd be like some clips of that in the extra features, and there wasn't. But but they actually spent a lot of time on the conceptual design of these costumes as well, because they wanted people to be able to get into them and out of them very quickly. So they were saying, some of these really complex costumes they could get into in a minute and a half and out of in 30 seconds. So taking a 10-minute break during filming wasn't that big of a deal. Whereas you see in some other films, they're filming all day wearing this costume, and sometimes they get sent to the hospital because they get dehydrated or heat exhaustion or whatever. So they took a lot of that stuff into account as well. And just it's not just the words in this. These Muppet characters do body acting, and it's just amazing. I can't use the word amazing enough. It's just a wonderful, wonderful film.
It's just easy to forget that they're just puppets.
Yes, it's completely forgettable. Well, that sounded really bad, but it's completely it's like you get sucked in.
Yeah.
And there's a statement about it which is obviously true, but I think it kind of gives you a little bit of a misleading idea of the film, because at the time it was hailed as being one of the only live-action films in which no human characters appear, which is 100% true. However, any time where they did a very far-off shot of either Jan or Kira, they actually had a person.
There are little people in there, yeah.
the quote was that Muppets can do anything you can conceive of them doing except walking and talking.
Walking and talking, yep.
You know, and I think that's a pretty big statement on, you know, just how far you can take it with your imagination. And, you know, yet there's these very basic elements that you have to just accept in order to believe it. And I think they do a really good job of making you accept it. I feel like we're drowning out, Brandon. When was the first time you saw it, Brandon?
When I was 4.
Wow, 4 years old. I was 10. I saw it when it came out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's showing your age.
Yep, I'm an old fucker. So, this movie is never. Every time I've seen it, and I'm not going to say I watch this often. I maybe watch it once or twice a year. But I think every time I've seen it, I've had a different appreciation for it, and each time it's positive. You know, I must have watched this movie, I don't know, 10 times this week. And that's I'm talking watched it. That's not counting how many times it was just on in the background while I was doing other stuff.
And it's hours of your time.
Yeah, and I've never bored of this movie. Never.
Yeah, there are two things this movie really has going for it also, and that is a lot of the artistry came from Brian Froud, which also did Labyrinth too, and he does these great artistic books of like fairies and trolls and goblins and things like that. And they brought him in to design a lot of these creatures, a lot of the background, and you can see that. I have a lot of his books. And also the music plays a huge part in this movie. Like they're on the Landstriders, and that they have the appropriate music for that. And they, you know, when the Mystics, they have, you know, the woodwinds and the quiet things like that. And when you get to the Skeksis, it's just crazy. And music in this movie, I think, it was a huge deal to be able to like immerse yourself in it with the puppets.
Were the Skeksis were they designed from something else?
They were supposed to be like a combination of lizards and dragons and predatory birds. I've
seen video games and such with something very similar looking to them, and it's just crazy how close they are to these things in Dark Crystal.
Well, I would definitely say that the video game was influenced by them, not the other way around.
Well, no, I'm not saying the other way around, but I'm just curious if they directly got it from that, or if they originated somewhere else.
There are some interesting pictures of the Skeksis next to like condors that were just hatched, with like they don't have any feathers or anything, and they look amazingly similar to that. But there was more than just one element that the Skeksis were drawn from. And also, if you look at them, when you look at the two bodies, even though at first glance they look radically different, their bodies are made the same. The Mystics and the Skeksis have the same type of body. They just carry themselves differently. The Mystics are very hunched over and they move slowly and deliberately, whereas the Skeksis kind of stand up and they waddle a little bit, and they fancy themselves a little more regal because they're the ruling power, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, at the very end, you see the Mystics actually stand up when the two races join back together. So even though these characters are very similar, they come across as very different creatures. So I just thought that's another interesting point in the the magic of the movie, how they make you see very different things.
Yeah, and that each Skeksis and each Mystic are joined together. Like if you kill one, the other one dies too.
Yeah, and that would have been useful information for Jen to have.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, by the way, kid, don't kill any of them.
Oops.
And one of the things I thought was interesting, and it was very close in time, was some of the parallels between the way things happen to the two races, as far as like when they die, their bodies both disappear, if you will, but the Mystics, they disappear in kind of a shiny fade away, whereas the Skeksis actually crumble. And if you look at that, that's a very similar thing as to the way they portray people dying when in Star Wars when they use the Force. And Frank Oz and Jim Henson were involved with Yoda, which was one of the first big puppet characters in movies. So it was an interesting portrayal, and somebody had brought that up to him because there's a very similar ending in the Muppet movie to this movie where everything the cathedral kind of comes crashing down, and they mentioned that they're like, it's like, did you mean that to be a nod? Did you mean to be a parallel? And he's like, I see no relationship to them whatsoever. They just happen to be recurring themes that are in his head. So I think that's another interesting little fact that you see his influence in these other films.
I'm really sad that Jim Henson is gone.
Yeah, I know. I imagine if computers hadn't had the huge jump in technology that they have, I wonder what we could have done with this type of filmmaking. I still think we'd be putting out these epic films. They'd just be made very differently. So
I would definitely like to see more movies like that, just to get a different take on fantasy in general.
Nobody will do it now. It's too expensive.
This movie was $14 million back in '82, which was pretty expensive for back then.
Yeah, and it only took in $40 million in the box office.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a bust or anything, but it didn't do great.
Right. So nowadays, I just don't think you would get any of the big studios to back it.
Which is sad, too.
But so I liked it, and I think I made Amina sweat a little bit because I was like, I'm going to troll her.
See, the thing is, you don't warn me ahead of time that you're going to troll me.
So, I liked it. She liked it. Brandon apparently liked it. So if you haven't seen it, watch this movie. Buy this movie. Show it to your kids.
Make your kids watch it.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I think it's like probably $5 at Walmart.
Yeah, and they might be bored with the first 5 minutes of the movie, but they will get sucked in, I promise. And on that note, we're going to go ahead and pick our next movie, and we got Dante.
Hey, Dan. All right. See if I'll drop the ball. Nope. There's two. Take a second.
They're not quite blue. All right, can you see that? Let's see.
No.
No.
I saw it for a second. It's a 57.
Like Heinz.
And that means... Ha ha ha.
Oh, my.
Yes.
Oh,
That'll be fun.
Yes, I love this movie.
Are we including Clerks 2 in this?
We can include Clerks 2. I would even say we could include the crappy one, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back.
Well, there's others, obviously, though. But.
Yeah, they're all part of the same universe. But Clerks just was a very different kind of movie. I think he made that on budget using his credit cards. Just this movie's not for everyone, but it is. If you have a sense of humor, you should like this movie. We'll save it for the next show. But it's one of my favorites. I really enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to talking about it. So, and that's it. We had the Dark Crystal today. On behalf of myself, Brandon, Mina, Dante, that's a wrap.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Or if you want to follow along with our antics when we're not in front of the camera, you can check us out on our social media pages on Facebook, Google+, or Twitter by searching for the M Cluster. Or you can leave comments in the field below. Or you can send us an email or give us a call. Heck, you can even write us a letter. Or you could buy us dinner. Or you could buy us a car. That would be awesome. Or you could send us on vacation. Or get us an Emmy. Ooh, a Tony. If you could get us a Tony, that would